in tonight to see our author event, another virtual author event, this time with Eric Utne, who's going to be speaking about his book, Far Out Man, and it's going to be in conversation with our friend Neal Karlen. If you have not yet taken a look at the book or purchased it, we will drop a link in the comments under this video later in the event. That's also where you should put any questions. We will be taking audience questions later, so you can type them right in the comments and we can see them here, and we will get to them after Neal and Eric's conversation. Thanks so much for tuning in and supporting an independent bookstore. Majors & Quinn is located in Uptown Minneapolis, so if you happen to be in the Twin Cities area, check out our website. We have all of our information on how to shop at Majors & Quinn available. We are open to the public at the moment. Of course, restrictions and masks and everything apply, and all that information can be found on our website. And our website is, of course, available 24/7, and you can order books to ship anywhere, including internationally. So thank you again for your support, and please allow me to introduce our speakers tonight. Neal Karlen is former contributing editor for Rolling Stone, Newsweek staff writer, and regular contributor to the New York Times. He's the author of Babes in Toyland and other books ranging in content from minor league baseball to fundamentalist religion to linguistics. And most recently, he was a guest for a virtual event for his new book about Prince. So you can check that out on our website as well. This thing called Life. There it is. Eric's got it. And then Eric Utne is writer, publisher, and social entrepreneur. In 1984, he founded the Utne Reader, the field guide to the emerging culture. Magazine grew to over 300,000 circulation by the early 90s. He was the editor and publisher of the Reader for 16 years. In 1991, the magazine formed the Neighborhood Salon Association to revive the endangered art of conversation and start a revolution in people's living rooms. That's awesome. Utne has a BEd from the University of Minnesota and is a senior fellow at the University of Minnesota Center for Spirituality and Healing, where he co-authored a series of courses called Whole Systems Healing. Utne has 4 sons and 5 grandchildren and currently lives on the St. Croix River in Minnesota. Thank you both for being here and have a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Annie.
Thanks.
So Neal.
Neal just disappeared.
So
why don't you tell us a little bit about the book there?
Okay, I've got a new book. I'm very excited about it. It's called Far Out Man. Subtitle is Tales of Life in the Counterculture. And it's a few things. It's a history of the counterculture in the US, starting with the 60s. It's the story of my 4 mentors who meant most to me, including 2 Minnesota legends, Brenda Euland, who was my step-grandmother. And Brenda wrote a book called If You Want to Write, that is sort of a cult classic. It was republished in 1987 by Grey Wolf, 2 years after Brenda died. And they have sold over 300,000 copies of Brenda's book. There's a kind of conspiracy all over the world of people who, when you meet someone who's read any of Brenda's books, but especially that one, there's a kind of bond because she just leaps off the page. She was my mentor starting when I was 12, when she married my grandfather, Sverre Hansen. And Brenda used to say that her marriage to Sverre was a conspiracy of fate to bring the 2 of us together. And she'd lean forward so our foreheads were almost touching, and she'd say, because you and I, Eric, were closer than kin. And the book's also about my relationship with Robert Bly, another Minnesota legend. And it was a complicated one. I published, my ex-wife, Peggy Taylor, published the interview with him in New Age Journal, a magazine that I was involved in starting and editing back in the 70s. And she published an interview with Robert that really launched the men's movement. And I was sympathetic to the men's movement, but I didn't participate in it for a while until I got to meet Robert. and I published some things that about him and things that he wrote, including that portions of that interview in the Utne Reader, and we became friends. And then it's a complicated story, but it's in the book. We had a complicated friendship. The book is also the story of the Utne Reader, and I tried to do that as faithfully as I could. I got a call from one of my colleagues today saying I did a good job, so I was relieved to hear that. And the book is also, it's a call to baby boomers to get back on the barricades and finish what we started. So that's, now that we've got Neal here, I'll shut up.
Well, I'm wondering, first of all, it's called Far Out Man. It's a great book. It really is. I read it, so I wouldn't. But I was once talking to a really wise man who actually made a living being a wise old man. And I said, do you believe in reincarnation? And he said, I believe you can be reincarnated in your own lifetime. And reading your book, I'm wondering, does it seem like, and sometimes it seemed like you had been reincarnated. I'm just looking at the 4 parts. Part 1 is hippie dropout. Part 2 is new age seeker. 3 is mythopoetic man. 4 is coming home. Does it seem like a different person when you read about the hippie dropout, or can you see this is Eric all the way through? You know. Well,
I was Rick then.
Rick.
Early on, I had a high school reunion with my U-High class of '64 2 days ago, and most of them know me as Rick. But that person in high school and the first part of the book feels not like another person, but I mean, I don't know. That's a great question.
So you were a rodeo guy, you know.
In college, when I kept dropping out and hitchhiking around Europe for a year and coming back and selling psilocybin, and that was another chapter that was. No, I still carry them all. I've got a big bag of them on my back. There's a light motif in there, I hope, somewhere.
Yeah. What was the most fun period? When you were a media mogul, or when you were selling psilocybin? Or
no, the psilocybin period was, I felt like Johnny Appleseed selling psilocybin. I was getting it from a guy in Chicago who was getting it from a guy, a weird professor at Harvard. And years later, I had Ram Dass, the kind of latter-day, the former partner with Timothy Leary at Harvard, who was doing all the LSD research. He went off to India, and he was Richard Alpert and became Ram Dass. And he was in my living room vetting an article that he had written in which he was exposing his former guru from Brooklyn, a housewife in Brooklyn who he had raved about in his earlier interview as the divine mother who was preparing him, Ram Dass, to become the bride of God. And 6 months later, he decided that he had been hoodwinked. And so he was writing an expose for the magazine I was editing at the time, which was New Age Journal. And he wanted to make sure he wasn't going to get sued. But I asked him at one point, he was telling me his whole spiritual history for 4 hours, sitting in full lotus on my couch. And I asked him, so what was the most profound spiritual experience you ever had? And without skipping a beat, he said, magic mushroom. and in that moment, I realized, oh, you were the crazy professor at Harvard who I was getting my psilocybin from. So
it's quite a group. Andrew Weil was in that group, and
yeah,
but
that was a very fraught time for me because I thought I was going to get busted at every turn, and it was, I was making myself sick because I wasn't just taking psilocybin, I was also taking speed, and it was a crazy time. I'd say now now's my favorite time.
Yeah, well, that's great, because when you said the word fraught, I was thinking of, if anyone wants to sort of get a taste of what the book is like, there's a great op-ed Eric wrote this summer. You can just go to nytimes.com and look it up. But it's talking about he talks about loss of hope, and I'm wondering what that feels like, because I've known you sort of for like 30 years in Birch Pharmacy, but I always saw you very hopeful, and I'm wondering, what does the despair you talk about, what does that look like for you? For me, it's I don't get out of bed and I'm like, my angst is on my show. I never saw you and thought, whoa, Eric is filled with angst today. I didn't mean like you were, but you seem to carry that joy with you. And it was weird, not weird, it was different to see like, whoa, you were really in despair about not just the planet, but yourself almost. Or am I reading, don't you love when people tell you what your book is about,
Yes. I can't tell you how many people have told me that my book about my life is really about their life and how they track it to find, and it brings back lots of memories for people about what they were doing at the time that I described what I was doing. But yeah, the piece of the New York Times, the title was Feeling Hopeless, Embrace It, Then Take Action. But I, like many of older baby boomers, had a sense of optimism and an expectation that the world was going to get better and better in every way. And GE Theater used to tell us that the purpose of General Electric was progress is our most important product. And I believed in it. I thought that the whole Western project was progress and that we were getting better.
TV dinners and,
You got it.
Big thin cars.
And I think certainly New Age Journal, we had a belief after the 60s and 70s that we were going to change the world, that truth, justice, civil rights, environmental protections. We had the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act in the around 1970, and women's rights and gay rights, and there were so many movements for change. The anti-war movement. I thought we were making progress, and then Stuart Brand with the Whole Earth Catalog, his line, "We are as gods, we might as well get good at it." I thought that was my Bible. And then in 2014, I read a piece in the New York Times about a guy named Paul Kingsnorth, who started a movement of writers, artists, musicians called Dark Mountain, the Dark Mountain Project. And anyone who's watching, I urge you to look it up. And they wrote a manifesto in 2010 called Uncivilization. And they said, at a time of extreme climate change and possibly collapse, and possibly the end of civilization as we know it, what is the role of the writer? What is the role of the artist? What story do we tell now? Well, I went and met him because I have a tendency to want to meet the people whose ideas are really speak to me and change my life. And so I found him in the back of the Beyonds in Western Ireland, living in a little place that he and his wife and 2 children live in. He got rid of his TV and credit cards and cell phone. And he was, one of his books was reviewed in The Guardian recently and he was called the best living writer in the English language today. He's a really a great guy. But when someone asked him in that New York Times interview, where do you turn for hope? He said, when someone uses the word hope, I reach for my whiskey bottle. And So I was in despair, in a kind of Nordic Ingmar Bergman despair, maybe, for some years. And then
were you philosophic, I'm in despair, or were you like, I am not happy with life type thing, you know? Was it an idea?
Like all the things I'd been disencumbered of my illusion that that the world was getting better.
Mm.
And I felt, and I could see it getting more mean, nasty, and brutish at every turn. On the highway, every other pickup truck seemed like it wanted to run me over in my little Prius. The civil niceties and graces seem to have vanished in the last 4 years, longer. Yeah, I don't attribute it all to Trump. I think Trump is a symptom of our times, not the cause. But I've got kids and I've got grandkids, and I didn't want to be a buzzkill to my kids. And that was really the thing that got me out of hopelessness and to what I call being hope-free. Because the only strategy is to like love them to pieces, to spoil them as much as I possibly can. Because who knows how much time we have left to spoil them. So that's my new strategy, is to live life with as much beauty and grace as I can.
Grace comes up. I like how you used it before. We're talking about your son's party pre-COVID down in the Amazon. But I was wondering, there was a quote from Kazantzaki's from, I think it was from Zorba, or was a report from Greco.
I think it's Zorba.
Yeah. Life is trouble, only death is not. To be alive is to undo your belt and look for trouble. And then I thought, well, on the other hand, there's the old blues song, don't go looking for trouble, trouble will find you. It seems like trouble is out there, you know. Does that advice still hold 6 months or however long since you wrote that, since George Floyd, since COVID? Should you go looking for trouble, or will trouble find you? You know, and how do you live with grace? That word, I just love that word. I love that as a name. When we are facing, as you pointed out in your op-ed, what seems to be like actual extinction. I mean, not tomorrow, but next week.
Yeah,
it's not theoretical to a lot of us anymore, as you point out. You know, how do we live day to day? Is there a connection to, like, you know, the Zen surrender, that whole thing, to living with grace in the face of such horror?
Yeah, I think so. It's my son Oliver lives in Quito, Ecuador, and he and his wife Alegria from Ecuador. I think Oliver sees the world as I do, probably as much or more than my other 3 sons. And they decided to have a wedding party last January because, like, what else is there to do but to bring more grace and beauty into the world? So they had 150 people for like a 4-day wedding that was the best party I've ever been to in my life. It was so much fun. And they did it with beauty and grace, because I think people are concerned that if you're hopeless, why not just be hedonistic? Or in this, I'm still the things that I think are really important now are really listening, being in nature and in wild nature as much as I can, and listening to what it has to say to me, which is a new thing for me. It's really trying to cultivate a kind of listening that I haven't done before, and getting to know my neighbors, my immediate neighbors. You know, one is had a Trump sign out that read "Guns, God, Family, Community, and Neighbors," and they're wonderful people. Their chickens come over to our place every day and shit on our deck, and they give us their eggs from time to time.
Yeah.
And it's they're just really wonderful people. And so I want to do what I hope a lot of other people do, which is to have some kind of healing that needs to happen in this country. I want to get to know my neighbors. I think that's how to do it. And my immediate neighbors. I want my community to be the people with a Frisbee throw away, not across town and across the planet. You know, I love those people. Those are a network, but they're not real community. So my attention now is on the natural world and my community.
That's so different from, because when they used to always talk about the Utne Reader, or in your words, you'd call it, you know, we're trying to deduce the zeitgeist that kept coming out, you know, the world view. And so your eyes had to be on the world to get that view. And now looking on your block instead for Nancy, is that an altering, or is it just a revision of how you get to a better?
Well, you use the word zeitgeist, and I have to say that
I'm quoting you.
Yeah, well, I want to quote the person who taught it to me, which is Jay Waljasper, and I want to give a shout out right now. And I'm holding this candle for Jay, because Jay is struggling with. He's got some health struggles right now that I would really ask anyone who knows him, and if you probably you're watching because you heard of Utne Reader, and but Jay was the man behind the curtain at the Utne Reader, who was editing every word and most of the cover stories, and he taught me the word zeitgeist, and the zeitgeist means spirit of the times, and that being tuned into the zeitgeist, I think was the thing that the magazine was most good at, and that's really a tribute to Jay and his wife Julie Ristow, who was right there at the beginning. And the magazine by rights could have been called the Waljasper and Ristow Reader, not the Utne Reader. But light a candle for Jay, say a prayer. So anyway, you were asking about the zeitgeist. I think the reason that I was able to,
Jay for sure, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's
the reason that the magazine was able to read the zeitgeist, I think, is because we were Minnesotans stuck out here on the prairies, or between the prairies and the forests. And I have a little thing from the book I'd like to read about that. Would now be a good moment? So in the part where I'm talking about the Utne Reader, I tell about starting the Alternative Press Reading and Dining Salon, which was a group of kind of media junkies who gathered once every issue to talk about what they've been reading about, and but even more importantly, what they'd been thinking and obsessing about. And I was trying to explain to my self-described New York East Coast Ivy League snob of father-in-law at the time why I didn't want to publish the magazine in New York or Boston or San Francisco or LA, but in Minnesota. So anyway, and this is something I've often wondered about. What is it about Minnesotans and what is it about Minnesota that produces so many writers and readers? And I'm thinking of Scott Fitzgerald, Bob Dylan, August Wilson, Louise Erdrich, Robert Bly, and countless others. And of course, up there in the pantheon is Prince. And I hope this can lead to you telling us a bit about your book, Neal. This thing called life, and especially maybe you'll even read something or talk a bit about
this is your bar mitzvah, boy.
Your Minnesota Nice chapter. So, or your Minnesota Mean chapter, I mean. So what is it about Minnesotans? Unlike New Yorkers and Washingtonians and Los Angelinos and San Franciscans, Minnesotans know they're not living in the center of the universe. They're out there on the margins, on the edge of the Great Prairie, or deep in the North Woods. Like Nick Carraway in The Great Gatsby, their outsider status gives them a unique perspective, perhaps even a special insight. They become media-savvy sophisticates, keeping track of what's happening all over the world. They stay on top of what's going on in arts, politics, fashion, just about any cultural realm you can think of, as well as, or better than anyone else. Minnesotans are prairie polymaths, cosmopolitans from the heartland. So you've got a different take.
No, I agree.
That's how you got to be who you are, Neal, is because you're a Minnesotan.
I am. That's why I get to say nasty things. But it's like, I think you can believe both, that we're that, and we're also this passive aggressive, Yantalovin, fit in. We don't say something sucks. We say that's different. Like diversity is, you know.
We noticed that when I moved back from New York with Nina, my ex-wife, with whom I started the magazine, and she preserved it long after I left for years. Bless her soul. When we came here, she noticed that people, if they talk about a movie or something they read, they'd say, well, that was really different. Whereas in New York, people would say, well, that was really interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
But in Minnesota, if anything, because everything was the same all the time, the rare exception was described as being different. And that was enough to say about it for Minnesotans.
Yeah. And I think you can believe both. I mean, Fitzgerald had that line about the mark of a mature mind is to be able to accept two completely opposite. I mean, I'm paraphrasing.
That was Anderson.
At the same time, and not go insane. And you write about that, the paradoxes that you can believe at the same time. So I may feel that way, but I do love it here, you know, in its own way. But accepting paradoxes seems hard. It seems to run throughout your book. You know, you're wanting to be a success, running a very, you know, idealistic magazine. You know, I mean, you're quite upfront about you do want to make dough, and but you know enough to hire really smart people. I mean, when I think of the Utne Reader, I think of, you know, Elizabeth Larson and Gene Haney and the people I know who just, you know, wondered, how did you make the Utne Reader? Oh, you got the smart people in town. But how did you make the Utne Reader? What was your elevator pitch to people on what it was, and how did you know who to get the J's to
well, I thought I was starting a newsletter that I would edit from my kitchen table, and I gave away the first 4 issues as free copy offered to potential subscribers, thinking that they'd then get hooked, just like my psilocybin customers. But instead, they accepted the free copy offer, but didn't subscribe. And so I was forced to think, you know, and one of the readers wrote, you know, don't give us abstracts, give us the thinking itself. So instead of a 12-page newsletter, I suspended publication and then reinvented the magazine as a 128-page magazine that had real articles in it. But it was, you know, I have been afflicted with that thing where instead of either or, I wanted both. I used to say my epitaph, I was going to say all of the above. And because I've always thought, you know, everybody has a piece of the truth, but you have to have the whole mishigas to get the whole truth. And that's kind of what the magazine was editorially You know, we need an Utne Reader now. We need something that's not polarized, but sees that there's left, right, and off the wall, and we need to hear all of them.
Yeah, well, it was 300,000 was the height of circulation, right? What are those people now, and what are they? I mean, what are they thinking? You read about like as the baby boom ages, that there's sort of a despair that has set in. I mean, I've read articles, you know, the suicide rates for that age group have gone.
Oh, really?
A hope that didn't pan out, and it seems like a lot of people did turn to despair, you know. And you know, have you seen that in friends at all? Is it a different kind of despair than you're talking about? And you know, is it just that the time has come?
Another trend that I'm that I find I'm part of. That's
well, it's interesting. I saw the Utne Reader started in 1984, which is also the year that Newsweek named the year of the yuppie. You know, those are two different zeitgeists.
Yeah.
The Utne Reader and the year of the yuppie. And
it's true. And so I kept, I did a survey to our readers within 2 years of our launch, asking them, have you given up? And invoking the word yuppie, because, you know, people who were more interested in style and making it than anything else. And our reader, and so we did an extensive survey with Stanford Research Institute and American Demographics, and asked them, how are they spending their time? How are they spending their money? And where are they turning their attention? And it turned out they hadn't given up. They were the most activist group in America. They were very educated, but they cared, and they were, you know, giving their money as well as their time to causes that they believed in. But those causes by then, even by 1986, were much more local. They weren't big issue causes. It was much more stuff that they could get their hands on and have some influence on, rather than, you know, by then, Ronald Reagan had been in office for 4 years, and the right had mounted a major counterattack on the kind of changes that we associate with the 60s and 70s movements for change. And there was a very deliberate, concerted effort to co-opt and to subvert, as well as to thwart environmental protections, restraints on business, worker protections. It goes on, and it was just, and it's been downhill ever since, as far as I'm concerned. I think Clinton, you know, accelerated Reagan's changes rather than turn them around.
Mm-hmm. Before we take questions, I want you to read another passage, but I also wanted to ask you two quick things about process. One, not process, but looking over your whole life now, do you have any regrets? And some people say, no, I have no regrets. Some people say, all I have is regrets. Do you wish you had done anything differently? And what did you learn anything about yourself while doing this that you were surprised about? I mean, and what was the most surprising thing you learned about? I know it sounds from questions you ask well, but I was curious if the process was a learning one for you. Did you like realize, oh, I'm this way, or and were there regrets? And then please read more. Let's hear your word.
Jeez. That's a lot in a one. So writing this book was an incredible privilege, and I feel very grateful for being able to have done it. I mean, it took 8 years, and I realized in the writing of it that not many people would be able to devote that kind of time to it. It was also kind of like dying and having your life flash before your eyes in slow motion. And it was painful to see how many decision points I came to where I didn't make a conscious decision. I just followed some instinct or intuition, and I left a trail of carnage in my wake, and I regret that sincerely and deeply, and especially its effects on my kids and my exes. But I also really am glad to be alive, knock on wood, and whatever it took to get me to where I am right now, I'm grateful for. So I just hope people will forgive me. It's really, and I know I can't assume that, but it's, but
Forgive you for what? For
whatever it was, whatever in whatever way I wronged,
okay.
especially, you know, by not really listening and feeling what they might have been feeling. You know, there's one description of what happens after you die is that you encounter every person who you had a relationship with in life, and you feel the feelings that they had in relationship to you. And that could be hell, or that could be heavenly, or it's all, you know, so live your life that way.
It sure is karma. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. You know, that's kind of what I learned in writing it. I had no idea that I would be kind of reviewing and digesting and kind of trying to metabolize this uncooked, unmetabolized experiences of my life. And it's, you know, it's led to going back and trying to make amends. I think when I left the magazine, I taught school for a couple of years, and that was a kind of, I didn't do it for the reason of redemption, but it was the hardest work I've ever done. And the kids, it was middle school, and and I loved it. It really made me appreciate what teachers go through, and I had no idea. And it's, yeah. So that's not a complete answer to your question, but it's.
Well, but it's there. There's hope in the book, which is good, because I'm a cynical old, and I'm really genuine, you know. So
it's not hope; it's hopelessness,
yeah,
or hope-freeness.
I didn't put it down and go, "What a drag!" I mean, it was like,
oh,
it gave me, but it didn't give me that kind of fake sitcom hope. You could see the journey. It really was a journey, and sometimes it's hard to look back, and it's almost painful, and you were able to do that. So can you favor us with some more of your words there? You
know? Was there,
you had another passions, I thought, that you wanted to read?
Gosh,
I'm not making you. I just thought you had a, you know, read it.
No, well, I had one, but it's too long. I'll just read the last two paragraphs.
Okay.
Well, a little more. It's now February 5th, 2020, a Wednesday, and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I know because of the eerie, haunting wail of the civil defense siren blaring outside my window. It's 14 degrees above zero, and there's a gentle, swirling snowfall. Sky and earth and lake are all the color of milk. As the sirens subside, the only sounds are the hum of a refrigerator and the occasional drone of a jet coming in low for a landing at the Twin Cities airport 5 miles away. I sit here in my big black lazy boy, looking out the window. I ask myself, what have I learned for all my seeking? What, if anything, do I have to say? This is what comes to mind. Then I'm skipping some really great stuff, but you're going to have to buy the book to see that. And then the last two paragraphs. I've been working since dawn, rising several hours before my beloved to write in the morning quiet. I'm still wearing my frayed terry cloth robe, unshaven, my hair disheveled. I need to walk badly and am comforted to know that if I don't initiate one, my sweetheart will. Around 5 o'clock, we will get home from our walk, lie down on the living room couch and take a nap. Then we'll rise, have a glass of wine and a bowl of stew, and get back to our writing for the evening. And it is queer. I'm deep in don't know about what's next in life, but I feel strangely calm, more curious and interested than anxious. I find myself paying attention to synchronicities, to song fragments and random comments that move me, to my memories and dreams. I'm listening for what is needed and wanted and what is mine to do. I'm alert to the needs that arise around me through direct requests from my family and friends, from complete strangers, and via news items in the media. Like Parsifal, I'm learning to ask, what ails thee and how can I help?
30th of March. Whoa, thanks. That
Thank
is
you.
from Eric Utne's Far Out Man, which Utne that truly translates from Norwegian to Far Out
Well,
Man. I mean, is
yeah,
it?
there's a little story. That's worth telling. When I was trying to be a hippie, my father told me, trying to have a conversation, which was very hard between us, that our name in Norwegian means far out. Because ut, U-T, means out, and a place that's ut is out there at the end of the peninsula. That's Utne, Utne. So, to which I said, far out, Dad. And then years later, when I was thinking of calling the magazine I wanted to publish Utne Reader, I contacted Robert Bly, who I hadn't met yet, but I knew that he translated from Norwegian. So I called him out of the blue, and I said, Robert, is it true that what my father tells me, that Utne means far out in Norwegian? And there was this long pause on the other end of the line. And finally he said, you could say that. So I got licensed from the poet himself.
Yes. Yep. That's it. Well, I see there are a lot of comments talking about the salons. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? That was, it started in the 90s, right?
Yeah. In the March, April 1990 issue, we ran a cover story, the headline for which was Salons, how to revive the endangered art of conversation and start a revolution in your living room. And in it, we ran a little ad inviting our readers to send us their name and their daytime phone number if they wanted to meet other Utne readers in their zip code. And by this time, we were at least 250,000 subscribers. So there were a lot of people in parts of the country, and but we had no idea what was going to come of it. And we got almost 10,000 responses from readers saying they wanted to be part of a salon. And I put together a little So You Want to Salon handbook and sent it out to everybody. And we organized 500 salons. There were 40 in LA, 29 in Manhattan, 33 in the San Francisco Bay Area, 17 in the Twin Cities, of about 20 people in each. And they would meet in each other's living rooms or church basements or a coffee house, but mostly in their homes without, at the time we were more trusting and less nervous about a weird stranger coming into the group.
And where did this idea come from? Did you think of it? Did the staff? It's
no,
oh, what a good idea. But where did that idea come from? Because it didn't really.
One of my mentors was a guy named Bob Schwartz, and he had a conference center in Westchester, just north of Manhattan. And he was this great talker, and he had a lot of chutzpah, and he was a journalist. He'd written a bunch of cover stories for Time and Harper's, and at one point he was the entrepreneur in residence at Time magazine with Peter Drucker as his office mate. And he had this idea to start the first conference center in America, and he bought a great big estate on the Hudson with no money of his own and a lot of chutzpah. He got IBM and AT&T to go in and vouch for him, convincing them that he'd let them use the place for so many rooms a year. So anyway, they backed him, and he started having these salons, and he would invite people like Joseph Campbell and Margaret Mead and R.D. Lang and a bunch of the people who were my pantheon of ideological deities. And I just loved the idea. And then so after starting Utne Reader, I was in the West Coast on business, and one of the 40 salons in LA, one of the organizers said, was hosting a salon, a representative from each of the 40 salons. And so I invited myself, and I asked the group, what are you doing in these salons? And one person stood up and said, well, we write letters to our senators and congresspeople together. The next person stood up and said, well, we were going on a camping trip, but it rained, so we had a pajama party. And the next person said, he was African-American, I'm from Long Beach, and the Rodney King beating had just happened, and so they were getting Apple and other companies to create an enterprise zone and giving free equipment in the neighborhoods that had gotten destroyed, just like what happened on Lake Street and throughout the Twin Cities this summer. So anyway, marriages and businesses and co-housing projects and schools all happened because of these salons. It was my favorite part of doing the Utne Reader, is bringing the readers together, introducing them, and kind of turning them loose to do whatever they wanted. And I just loved it.
I'm seeing from the comments too, they still exist. People are still having them. And I was about to ask, would it be possible now to have X numbers of people not of all the same opinion in the same room without it ending in a wrestling match, but so people are doing that,
Yeah, I think what we tapped into is that, we evolved as social beings, and that's what protected us. That's what human beings are social beings, and we all live now in these atomized either empty nests or nuclear families. And I think the hippies had it right to have communes and have these kind of multi-generational households. I interviewed Margaret Mead, and she said that 99.9% of the time that humans have been together, we've been in groups of 12 to 36 people. Maybe COVID will move us to create pods of safe relations where we might start building houses that are meant for pods rather than nuclear families. I really think this may be a big turning point in how humans socialize. It won't be enough to just have screens and networks of friends who are around town. We're going to have to start getting to know our neighbors and creating a kind of a safe pod that's very convivial, and who knows, it might be polyamorous. It'll lead to a kind of tolerance for diversity that we haven't experienced in our little atomized and alienated lifestyles heretofore.
If you were, as you are right now, looking at you leading the first salon and the Loring restaurant, what would you say to him now, or what do you wish you could have told him that he didn't know then, or would you have just let it go as is? You could see 5 minutes of 1984 in your life. What would you tell Eric Utne from then? Advice, or don't do that, or do this, or is it or not,
You're really mean, aren't you?
No, it's stuff I wonder about myself, like, as having just done sort of memoir, I couldn't bear to look back on certain parts of my life. They hurt
Well,
too much, sort of. Just
there were many times when I regretted sticking my name on it.
really. Okay.
Calling it Utne Reader. Yeah. In fact, we even had a contest a few years into it in which we asked our readers to help us rename the magazine. And we got some great suggestions. It's the Eclectic Reader, I recently thought it should be called the Wall Jasper Reader, or the Wall Jasper and Ristyle Reader, or the Hasty Reader. But most of the respondents, and there were a couple thousand, over 1,000 of them said, keep it. We love having it be called Utne. Nobody knows how to pronounce it. So you have to learn how to say it from someone who's already in the cognoscenti. Yeah. So now I don't regret that.
Well, I hope that didn't come off as mean. It's interesting.
No.
Listening to 35-year-old tapes, I wanted to, when I hear me interviewing someone, I'd want to like shout at me, don't do this in your life. I mean, it had nothing to do with what we were talking about. It was like what was going on in my life at the time. I want, you're so wise. One is so wise in retrospect, and
Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot of wisdom, but or even any, but
wisdom. I mean, all I have, the only wisdom I have with the years is the growing knowledge of how vast my ignorance is. The ever expanding.
Well, one of the things I've found in writing the book that many baby boomers think is that to be a mentor is to tell your wisdom, tell your story. And I don't think that's it at all. And this is one of the major themes of the book, is to be a mentor is not to talk about anything so much as to listen. And that's what my best mentor, I think, the one who taught me most about how to be a man, was Brenda, a woman. And she knew how to listen. And she wrote a fantastic essay called Tell Me More, all about the art of listening. When ironically, she did most of the talking whenever we were together, but she understood what it means to listen and how transformative it is. And to be a mentor, especially for young people today don't want to be talked to. They need to be seen and heard. And that's a big message I try to get across in the book, is how to see and hear another person. Yeah,
someone here mentioned, I think it was Brenda's book. I just wanted to mention its name. I think Grey Wolf still has it in print. Oh, If You Want to Write. It's a wonderful book.
Yeah, it's out of print at Grey Wolf, or at least it was, unless they've revisited it. But it's available online and probably for free. People could download a PDF, because there are a lot of people who are passing it around these days on the internet.
I see someone has asked about mentoring. How would you define what a mentor is? I mean, it's a vague.
Well, mentor, the word comes from the Greek, and it was the mentor was, gosh, I have it in the book. I'm forgetting. It was the friend of a father who was put in charge of the father's son when he went away to war, and mentor took responsibility for the young person's education. But what a mentor does, as I was saying, was I think it's much more about really seeing and hearing another person. Mm-hmm. And it's not just what an older person can do for a younger person. But I do urge readers, especially baby boomers, to find a young person and to mentor them, meaning listen to them, really see them and listen to them, and ask them to teach you something, and see how you can support them in what they want to do.
I was going to say, what's the difference between a teacher and a mentor? They're both important, but just, it seems like there's
if a teacher really knows how to teach, often they'll employ the practices of a mentor. Mm-hmm. Too often, it's the teachers in a Waldorf school, and what I learned in teaching middle school is that education is not filling buckets, it's lighting fires. And that's perhaps the difference between teaching and mentoring.
I like that. Say that again. I want to.
Well, I wish I could. It comes. I've heard it attributed to a number of people, and I'm not sure. One of them was a Greek, another was Emerson, another was a Norwegian educator, but they were saying that education is not filling buckets; it's lighting fires.
Yeah.
And I would say that teaching too often is filling buckets, but real mentorship is lighting fires.
Yeah, that's great. There's so many good questions. Your son has written lead for "You've Ruined My Life." Oh, sorry. No. You can see that. Everyone can see that, didn't I? But there are a lot. You should read these comments. There are a lot of wonderful comments.
I have to tell you a story. We were just talking about teaching. So I had a friend come in and teach sex education. We called it human creativity. And he talked about human anatomy and STDs. And this was in 2001. And at the end of his teaching, opened it up for questions from my students. And Michael raises his hand and blurts out, "You've ruined my life." Bless him.
That's great. I see an authority figure.
It's me. I'm back. Well, first of all, I was just coming back to say, Neal, you have been keeping such good track of the comments. I really didn't have to come back until now, which is awesome. And I just wanted to say that I am loving hearing about everyone's salons that they are in, or that they were started by their parents, or that are still going. That is really cool to see. So
can you save this?
Yeah. So what is yes, all of the comments will still be visible underneath the video on Facebook, so I can get that to you and you can check them out anytime. Also want to say thanks, Leif, for linking to the Majors and Quinn link to Brenda's book. That's awesome. And I should now remind you all that Eric's book, Far Out Man, is available at majorsandquinn.com. So head to majorsandquinn.com. There's a nice little search bar. Far Out Man should come right up. Same thing for Neal's book. Yes, this thing called Life. There it is. So yeah, definitely head out there to our website if you want to look at those books further. And yeah, we have reached our time. I want to thank everyone for their comments and questions. Neal, especially for your wonderful questions, and Eric for your.
I think I was blackballed from the salons after I went to one, and I said, I made some statement about the Dalai Lama was in show business. 30 eyes, 60 eyes turned to me, and I was never asked back, never spoken to again. You know.
Was it you who said in discussing Michelle Bachmann that the Dalai Lama said, or someone was wondering what the Dalai Lama would do about Michelle Bachmann, and he said, "I'd string her up."
No, I had been blackballed.
It wasn't you.
Okay. I've been drummed up. Anyway, thank you, Majors and Quinn.
Thank you both. Well, I'm thinking that we'll need to have you back, Eric, to talk more. Seems like really specifically about salons and, you know, people's ideas for, you know, the new guard of salons and how do we do this? And, you know, your idea of pods, our communities, how is that going to change post-COVID? So maybe when the paperback comes out, we'll have you back and we'll keep this conversation going.
Maybe we'll do, maybe I'll brush off that little pamphlet I did, The Salon Keeper's Companion.
Yes, add a section about Zoom salons, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And pods. People want to know about pods.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you again. It looks like we have one more comment from Karen. I will add your book to my library. Christmas gift to self. Awesome. That's great, Karen.
Well, thank you for coming. I see lots of familiar names there. It's really great. One of which
You owe a lot of people money, I see. Yeah, they seem to have found,
They found
they seem to have found you. You know, all at once, you know.
caught again. I think it's Ross Levin. I'm not sure if he's after me or you.
Well, for different reasons. I remember Ross in 5th grade, and I hit him in the head with a golf. Anyway,
That explains it.
but the beef is we've quashed the beef. You know. So,
All right, everyone. Well, this video will remain available on the Facebook and YouTube channels for Majors and Quinn. So send your friends there so they can watch it, and head to our website to see more information about Eric and Neal's books. And thank you once again for watching a virtual author event from an independent bookstore. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Annie.
thanks, Annie.
Thank you, Neal.